We're live.
Hey.
Everybody. I'm live here with Mr. Eidel Mazard of à-bas-le-ciel from YouTube. And we're here to talk about a variety of stuff. Let me just start by, are you on? Check.
I'm happy to be here, man, and I'm happy you're still in the game. It feels like all these years later. I don't know if it's 2 years later, 2.5 years since we first talked, but yeah, I'm just happy to see you're still in the game, and I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy you're in the game too. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. You must know a lot of people who disappeared. You must have known a lot of talented people who were on a microphone and a camera, whatever, 3 years ago, and where are they now? You never find out, right?
Yeah, and some not so talented people.
Too, yeah.
But yeah, maybe we should. So I want to. We're going to talk a little bit more about who you are and what you do. But just to summarize it real quick for anybody who doesn't know, you're sort of. I don't know if you have how you would just describe yourself, but I would consider you, among other things, sort of an internet commentator with no particular specialty, whether it's science or politics or history. Maybe not so much science, but politics, history, internet. Drama, anything that you find interesting, you seem.
From my perspective, everything I do is politics, and it has been. Like I'm not offended by that description, but like to give you an example, like when I talk about Batman, I'm talking about politics. It's a very political video talking about the new Batman movie. So for me, it's all politics, but I don't distinguish high culture from low culture. So for me, talking about Batman or talking about rap music or talking about some things going on within YouTube, whether that's Anissian or Jacqueline Glenn or one of these people, I take that seriously. And in some ways, I take that, it's just as seriously or more seriously than, for example, some Canadian politician who's going to come and go and may not really change the world as much as the new Batman movie or somebody like Jacqueline Glenn. But yeah, from my perspective, it's all political.
Interesting. So, okay. Well, let me ask you this. This is kind of a thing I've been thinking about lately, which is, we're going to jump into. We'll get back to talking more about who you are and your career and stuff. But since you brought this up, and you identify yourself as a political commentator, is that fair to say?
Sure.
All right. I've been thinking about this lately, like how much people are talking about politics, obviously with the election coming up and everything that's going on. But it's a word that you hear so often, but I don't know how often you hear it defined. So from your perspective, I imagine it's something kind of subjective, and different people would probably define it differently. But how do you define the word politics?
Great question. Great question. I think that the question of ethics is about how do I lead a good life, and politics is about how do we lead a good life. Now normally with politics, you're talking about at least a couple hundred people, not just a few dozen. But sure, even at a small scale, that's really what politics is about. How do we together live a good life? And it may be a society of dozens, it may be a society of thousands, or it may be a society of millions. Yeah.
Okay, it's interesting. So politics to you is connected to like ideals of what is a good life, and how do we institute that amongst large groups of people, I guess?
Or the lack of ideals. I identify as a nihilist. I'm a very pragmatic and non-idealistic person, but those questions are still really, really pressing. So yeah, and indeed, again, I'm not being sarcastic when I say, to give you an example, to stick with Batman, when I taught university classes in China, I asked the students, seriously, you look at Batman, you look at Spider-Man, do you think this is a story that parents should teach children? Do you think this is a story we should use in classrooms as teachers? And, not in a trivial way. Like, let's really think about what this teaches children. So, yeah, those are questions about how we together can live a good life or form a good society. You don't have to believe in anything. You don't have to be idealistic to really wonder about that and look around at trying to come up with new answers.
Do you think that many people consider, because I was just thinking, going back to your definition of politics, it's like, it seems reasonable to me. I mean, I'm still kind of grappling with what exactly I would define that as or what it means. But I don't think, do you think the average person sees politics like that? Or do you have an idea of what the typical perception is of that concept of politics?
Yeah, so we're talking mostly about white, Western, English-speaking people here. It'd be a different answer for Japan or India or Cambodia. But I think if you're talking about white, Western, English-speaking people, they mostly inherit a political identity the same way they inherit a religious identity. Why are you conservative? Why are you a member of the Republican Party or something like that? Very often the real answer is that's because their parents taught them to be that way or their grandparents taught them to be that way. And they put very little thought into what politics is or what their role in it ought to be. Now, a really great question would be, what percentage of the population is an exception to that rule? And I'll just mention also, so like, you could call what I do political entertainment. That might be insulting, but I don't mind being insulted. But if I'm making entertainment, it's for those people also. Look, I don't look down my nose at them. I think there were a lot of people who've never really questioned who they are politically or what they're doing or what politics means to them. They've just been carrying on doing what their parents and grandparents expected them to do. And still, there could be something really meaningful they encounter on my channel, and I get email from some of those people, and that could be something really meaningful for both of us, But yeah, you could divide society into two classes of people: those who've really come up with their own answers to those questions, and those who've never thought about it. They're just carrying on the same pattern handed down by their parents and grandparents.
All right. I kind of get the impression a lot of people think of politics as just kind of like powerful people arguing or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Well, no, but look, I mean, what if you live in communist China? One of the reasons why most Chinese people are incredibly ignorant of politics is that they're so far removed from it. That in communist China today, I'm talking about 2020, not the past, that definition would make a lot of sense. And the greatest role you can play as a member of the public is to kind of follow those debates from around the edges. And, people like military generals might be quite important in Chinese politics, and find out what these people in the military are saying and what other significant figures in the dictatorship are saying. I would say, too, a country like Egypt, how much of a role really can you have in politics? Egypt, which is always teetering on the edge of between democracy and dictatorship. There are countries where that definition would make a lot of sense and would have a lot of gravity, I think.
All right, then. Let's take a little step back here. Let's talk about your channel in general. So you've got a YouTube channel that you've been doing for what?
Yeah, over 5 years. Yep, over 5 years, and we're coming up on 5 million views now. I think it's 4.7 million views.
All right. And from my understanding, you've specialized more in vegan-specific stuff, and then you've kind of more expanded, and I see you doing a lot less vegan content these days.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. The very beginning of my channel, I assumed it was going to be an atheist channel. So I am an atheist, in case people hadn't guessed. And the name of the channel even refers to that, à-bas-le-ciel. Sort of sense of like tearing God down out of his heaven. And
what that means? It means tearing God down from
this is an over translation. This is expanding a little bit. But yeah, so in French, à-bas-l'État is like, let's tear down the government, let's tear down the state. À-bas-l'État, that's quite often used in political protests. And à-bas-le-ciel is used less often. It would normally mean let's tear down the church, let's tear down religion, but it literally means let's tear down heaven, let's tear heaven out of the sky. So a very kind of ambitious atheist political meaning. So yeah, the channel started off with that, and I had just formally quit Buddhism. I'd been a scholar of Buddhism for, I like to say, 10 years. So I was interested in the critique of Buddhism and the critique of religion, and there was a lot of that popping on YouTube at that time. And I was really aware of the success of people like The Amazing Atheist. People all the time insult me, saying I'm not good looking enough to be a YouTuber. And I say, well, I was partly inspired by The Amazing Atheist. I don't think you need to be that good looking to be successful on YouTube. But yeah, there was then a long period where, when you and I first spoke, I was really trying to just make friends in veganism, and where that, I know it sounds very simple, but making friends in the vegan movement was the main thing I was doing with my channel for a couple of years. And that's now well and truly over. So you see, veganism comes up once in a while, but put it this way, these days I wear veganism like a shirt, but I don't wear it like a tattoo.
Okay, interesting. So can you, I imagine I know a little bit about the goings on with you in the vegan community, a vague idea, but just it's probably very complicated, but without going too in depth, can you give us like a general summary of how you kind of decided to step away from that, or what happened between you and the vegan community? I know there's a lot of controversy, but...
Yeah, well, the controversy is fun to talk about. I don't mind. We can talk about that. But in terms of, if you want to start at the end, in terms of stepping away, I really just felt there was a total lack of talent. As you said earlier, there's some talented people, some not so talented people. Going through all that controversy, I felt the positive part of it was that I met and spoke to kind of everyone in the vegan activist scene. Definitely everyone who speaks English. And all those people know me. Even the people who pretend they don't know me, they know me, they know my work. And that was a good thing about controversy, was it did connect me to all those people. Years and years went by. Something I used to say to people a lot 5 years ago was, where do you want to be 5 years from now? What are your goals? What do you plan to do in the next 5 years? And then what are we going to do together to get there? And 5 years went past, and all those people have accomplished nothing, and they're not trying to accomplish anything. So no, in terms of my stepping away from it, I have formally said that I quit the vegan movement. I still eat a vegan diet, but I have said that I quit vegan activism, which was a big turning point for me personally. I did literally shed some tears giving up on that. That was really deciding, okay, that chapter in my life is now over. But the actual controversies, some of them were very shallow and very silly. Some of them were very serious. I've always wanted to be honest about the things that other vegans were being dishonest and evasive about. It's like a real simple example that I think people in your audience can relate to. I think most people who are not vegan right now. A lot of vegans pretend that they don't kill rats, that they never would kill a rat, that they never would kill a cockroach. And that was something right off the bat. My YouTube channel was like, no, I'm going to be honest about this. I'm vegan. I kill rats. Even if I have the delusion that I don't kill rats, my landlord kills rats. When I go to the hospital, there are no rats at the hospital because the hospital is employing, a pest control company, and they kill the rats at the hospital. I buy groceries, and the groceries are produced at a farm that kills rats. No, our society's built on killing rats. We're going to keep on killing rats. Let's really be honest about this. And we can philosophize about it. We can talk about it. If you want to, we can shed a tear about it or something.
Yeah, are there rat activists?
Oh yeah, and they came after me, right? So those people all hate me. No, and there are people, and they keep rats in their apartment as pets, and they let you know that rats are just as intelligent as a 3-year-old human child, and they love rats, and if only I kept a pet rat, I would understand. And and there are people who break into laboratories and steal the rats that scientists are doing experiments on, and liberate, and then keep there are rat people, let's put it that way. yeah they're hardcore, man. And one woman wrote to me. She's a middle-aged woman now, and she wrote to me, and I googled her, and I was scrolling through her past social media friends. I said, hey, look, I appreciate that you're now a fan of my channel, but I can see just a couple years ago you were one of those rat activists. And she joked around, but it's tragic. I appreciate that. I'm not going to say rats don't have feelings, but we kill rats, and 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, we're still going to be killing rats. So let's not lie to ourselves.
Yeah, I try not to kill spiders and stuff. I don't think it's crazy to not want to kill a rat, but it's interesting that of all the things you could spend time doing activism for, that you shoot rats. But yeah. Yep. All right. So okay. So wait, we were still talking about so what happened with the vegan community?
Okay, well, I went through a series of controversies, but as I said, I saw that as more positive than negative. The one that, had the biggest impact financially was the controversy with Durianrider that ended up in court. So if people don't know, at that time, Durianrider's girlfriend Freely was getting about 12 million views a month on YouTube. So that was a big YouTube channel. And I don't know if maybe Durianrider was doing 2 million or 4 million a month. He was big, but he was very much in her shadow. And the controversy was attached to both of those. So I had a major vegan YouTuber who made up the allegation that I was a pedophile out of thin air. He specifically made up the allegation that he had spoken to underage girls directly who had provided him with evidence of this, that he was going to take to the police. He was going to have a gang of people beat me up and drag me to the police. And if you want to know what's the basis for this conflict, he was a vegan YouTuber who made exaggerated health claims about the benefits of the vegan diet. And this included, but was not limited to, his claim to have cured Crohn's disease. So that was one where I was really harsh with him. Okay, if you want to make vague statements that the vegan diet helped you lose weight or something, I'm not going to go after you. But no, Crohn's disease is a really serious disease. And I was really saying, no, this is something dangerous and bad and evil and wrong to mislead people suffering with this disease, that we can cure it through eating more bananas. That's not true. And everybody knows somebody who's got Crohn's disease, by the way. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I know a few people.
Yeah. So anyway, well, just so you know, you can't cure it with bananas.
That's great. I mean, so you.
So yeah, so that's one example. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, was it like a direct retaliation to that, or had you built up sort of, you'd criticized him multiple times, and then he started like looking for dirt or
That was really the turning point. No, I mean, I would say that really directly did, create the conflict. And, you know, he's also someone who was trying to make his living out of giving that kind of diet and health advice. So it's not, you know, I mean, I can kind of understand it from his perspective. Unfortunately, it's an insane and evil perspective, but I can understand his perspective. I just want to give him credit where it's due. Today, 2020, 5 years later, he has apologized to me. He offered to delete all the videos and all the blog posts that were denouncing me and calling me a pedophile. He has, so that's 5 years later, he did the right thing. Sorry, maybe it was 4.5 years later when that started, but many years later, he did hit a turning point. So that stuff is gone from his channel. Unfortunately, the damage is done for my career and my life in many ways. The flip side of that is, as I said before, these controversies, they put me in touch with really all of the leading vegan activists and vegan YouTubers. So I got to find out what I was missing in terms of the movement. So yeah, there was very briefly, there was a fundraiser. People donated, I think, $6,500 US so that I could have a lawyer and take him to court. We went to court, defamation lawsuit, or whatever you want to say, criminal charges for defamation. So yeah.
But were the defamation charges were against him for what?
Yes, because he defamed me, claiming that I was a pedophile, among other things. He made up a lot of other lies. And no, I mean, you used a good term before. You said, so did he get angry and go digging for dirt? Like, I wish he'd done any digging. It's all just fantasy. And the stuff he was saying about me, a lot of it, like, it doesn't make sense geographically, you know. And the last time I talked to him about it was just a couple days ago. I think like 3 days ago, I talked to him about this. And he seemed to genuinely have no memory of what he'd said. I could provide him with screenshots and so on. But my impression of Durianrider is that he is a genuinely mentally disabled man. He has said in court under oath that he has brain damage, and he's talked about that on YouTube from a bicycle accident. He had some kind of serious brain damage from a concussion to his head. And, he may have had other mental problems before that. And again, I could just say he's talked a lot about his own mental health history and learning disability history and so on. But that, as crazy as it sounds, he seemed to be sincere in not really remembering what he said. And most of the stuff he made up against me was, in a word, crazy. But I got to see how crazy all the vegans were, because they all jumped on, they all wanted to believe it. And, that's a very disappointing cross-section of the movement when you see all those people lining up to denounce you and make up stories about you. Anyone, if you were part of Buddhism, which I used to be, and you had that experience, you'd then look at your fellow Buddhists a little bit differently. Well, I had to learn to look at my fellow vegans a little bit differently too.
So was it a series of controversies and how this was all handled that kind of soured your, like, is that kind of what happened? Was you?
I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. The answer is no. That's a totally reasonable perspective. But, I am a very, very positive, highly motivated person who's happy to do my own thing, even if I think kind of everyone else is an idiot or everyone else is against me. So I know, like, it might be hard for other people if they don't know me personally to appreciate that. But no, there was one controversy after another, whether it was Durianrider, Unnatural Vegan, Nina and Randa, Vegan Cheetah, Charles Marlowe. There was this long series. What, Nina and Randa's dad, I'm forgetting his name now. Jeff Nelson, all this. Yeah, there was this crazy series of controversies. One more ridiculous than the next. But through all of it, I was happy, I was upbeat, I was smiling, I was laughing about it. Like, people insult me on the internet, and it's wind in my sails. Like, honestly, I feel totally positive about it. What broke me was the lack of talent. So 2 real quick examples. I wrote a children's storybook. Storybook's been translated into 6 languages. Tons of people love this storybook. Wanted to get an illustrator for the storybook. Could never find a vegan illustrator who wasn't completely insane and useless. We dealt with some people who were insane and let me down. And, I tried to have a conference where you'd get together a bunch of people and they'd present papers at a conference, and then we'd gather the papers and publish them as a book. And the lack of talent. At that time, I had money in the bank to do that in Vancouver. I was going to do it. And, the lack of talent made my teeth whiter. So there were things like that to me, it was just like, well, look, guys, I've been doing this for 5 years, and I don't have one other person I can work with or collab on, like not even collab on a YouTube video, So I thought it's time to end the experiment, If you say to yourself that something's an experiment, you have to accept that the outcome is unknown. Like if you say, okay, I'm going to do this as an experiment, like I'm going to try flying my flag for vegan activism and say, hey, let's get organized, let's do this, let's go, who's with me? You say, okay, I'm going to do that for 5 years. But then you have to admit, okay, well, this was the outcome. After 5 years, I'm all alone, and there's like nobody I even respect or want to work with or something. So yeah, that was what that was. Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, I kind of experienced a similar thing on YouNow, quite frankly.
Oh, yeah.
Because I imagine I would have stayed there longer if there was more peers or a sense of like, there was a couple. I don't want to discount. There was a few people, of course, that I clicked with. But I mean, if there was like a strong, tightly knit community of talented people, I'm sure that would have kept me there way longer, but there wasn't.
Yeah. And, I think, something I used to say to people now like 5 years ago was, look, if you think my videos suck, leave me in your shadow. Eclipse me, like do better, like get on the mic and show me how it's done, because I would be so happy to have somebody to look up to, like having people that are better than you, people you admire, that's really great too. So I feel you, whatever your art form is. And the only thing I'd add is, for me it became an art form. When I started doing YouTube, I didn't really see it that way. I used to say, I know you can probably remember me saying this from a million years ago. I used to say, no, for me, this is just like sitting down in a coffee shop and talking to a friend. And it did become an art form, became a major creative thing in my life. And that's still what it is, which is still positive.
I've noticed an evolution in the last couple of years. In particular, like you do a fair, I mean, I remember when I first saw your channel, it was pretty much just like, one long interrupted
Yep.
or whatever you had in your mind. But now you're editing and you're including, you're citing, what's it called? Sources and quotes, and there's a lot going on, and there's interesting. So can you let's talk about that just for a minute. I think a lot of people in here I know Vegan Called Quest has a few people in here who are familiar with your channel to a degree, but what's your process? Like we've already kind of just given the basic summary. You're making these kind of political commentary videos, but like, how does like a video start and end? Like I imagine you see or read something, and then that kind of gets an idea going, and then how do you get from there to...
Dude, I think nobody but my girlfriend would really believe how spontaneous it is. That it's so spontaneous, it's crazy. And that's the sense in which I'm good at it. Once I sat down in a Starbucks, I was in a Starbucks, and my girlfriend was here at home at the apartment. And I was like, Jenna Marbles, fucking bitch. She's feeding her dogs dead cow meat as dog food, and fuck that. She says she's vegan, but she's buying dead animals all the time.
Holy shit,
yeah, oh yeah, no, and while I was sitting there in the Starbucks, I made the whole video, and the couple of sources I didn't need, I was emailing my girlfriend, like, hey, can you find this? Can you find that? I asked my girlfriend, can you find the particular brand of dog food, Jenna Marl? And she did. She found it. So I don't know. I don't know if that was half an hour. It could have been a whole hour sitting in that. I don't know. A lot of work did go into that video. And I got this music, and I got the visuals, and I put it together. And, and I got, 500 or 1,000 thumbs down from Jenna Marbles fans. I don't know. We should check how many thumbs down that has now. But no, and it was totally spontaneous and unplanned. So that's something within veganism. But all kinds of other stuff I do, it is extremely spontaneous. Even talking about like politics of Cambodia, politics of ancient Greece, and politics of ancient Rome. And if there's one thing I've really learned is that if I don't do it in that spontaneous way, even if the factual content is the same, it will not be the same for me in terms of its mood or spirit if I go back and watch it again. Even if there's something comes up, like a friend of mine is dying of cancer, so it's like I have an idea for a video and then I can't make it for 5 days. There's some delay like that. When you come back 5 days later, I'm never going to make that video I made. I'm never going to be able to make the video I would have made if I'd done that 5 days before in terms of what's going on in my mind. All the time. I step out of the shower. There's something I thought of when I was in the shower, and that's the video, and I got to make it now, because if I don't, I won't capture that spirit, you know. And I haven't been real angry lately. My YouTube channel is consistently more popular when I'm angry. People like the video. That also relates to the Amazing Atheist thing. I would give that as advice for someone starting a YouTube channel. Even if you can come on the mic hot, if you can come on the mic angry, that does reach a bigger audience for whatever reason. But you know, that anger is maybe an easier emotion to understand. You know, if you're angry about something, then you know, make the video while you're angry. Don't do it later. Don't pretend to be angry. You know, but when you're feeling that way, when you're feeling, put it together. So yeah, even the most dry intellectual videos. I did a couple in the history of science. The videos I made talking about Sir Isaac Newton, they were completely spontaneous like that too. So yeah, and I think nobody would believe how spontaneous and unplanned all that stuff is.
Okay, interesting. So you have the idea, you record it, and then anything else that's seen in the video, you're doing that after. That's like post-production for you. You're not like planning things out elaborately in advance or anything.
Okay, even if there is planning, it all happens at the same time. Like it's all thrown together. Yeah, like yeah. I think that shows.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think that's one of the things I like about your channel. Okay, so let's talk a little bit, because the Jenna Marbles video clearly was controversial. Your presentation was. I want to talk a little bit about your sort of bluntness, because you're very, consider you a very thoughtful person. You think about a lot of issues, you do a lot of reading and research and what have you. But in terms of concern for, let's say, offending your audience, you seem to have none. Yeah. And I wonder what your sort of perspective is on that in this day and age, with the seemingly major emphasis on political correctness and all this kind of stuff. You seem to be willing to kind of say things that you also seem very aware that these things you say are potentially going to offend people or that they're controversial, and I don't get the impression that you care. I don't have like I guess a specific question, but I wonder if you could kind of talk about that a bit.
Well, I'd only disagree with your wording, because no, I mean it's an interesting point. Like I understand, I agree with the fundamental point you're making, but I do care. I'm actually a very caring person, and that's also why those videos are made in the way that they are. So whatever the issue is, like racism against First Nations people or the Black Lives Matter movement, like even if these videos are offensive, and they are to some people, even my videos talking about learning Chinese and the history and politics of China, believe me, those videos would be offensive to some people. You know, you're not a member of the Chinese Communist Party, but about 1 billion people are. They'd find what I have to say about Chinese people as offensive or blunt or, you know, inconsiderate about my audience's feelings as those things may be. I just made videos talking about Judaism and anti-Semitism. I'm ethnically Jewish myself. I'm completely aware my channel can be deleted for those videos. Like those are offensive enough in really talking about what's wrong with Judaism. I know this is going to hurt people's feelings, you know. And I had a couple of Orthodox Jews who were fans of my channel. And I know because they used to write to me trying to convert me. They were like, hey, come on, join Orthodox Judaism, because they know I'm genetically Jewish, whatever that means. I do care. A lot of it comes from a place of caring, and it goes to a place of caring. And that's one of the reasons I reach out to and talk to my audience, is that I really care. I care about them, and I care about the issues. However, everything else you're saying is completely true, that it is very offensive, it hurts people, and for better and worse, it changes people's lives. If you're asking why, I think that was the question, is why? Why is that my format, or why is that my aesthetic? I would say it really has to do with the total sense of rage or outrage I have toward Canadian society. And I'm really kind of screaming out my sorrow and bereavement in the face of the indifference of Canadian society, just as I would say Voltaire, the author Voltaire, was screaming out this way when he wrote Candide about what he saw as just the unbelievable evil that was thought to be good or normal in the society that he lived in. Now, why do I say that? I used to live in Germany. I used to live in Cambodia. I used to live in Thailand. I've lived in many different countries around the world. Probably if I'd stayed in any of those countries, probably if I'd stayed in South Korea or Japan, I probably wouldn't be like this. I probably wouldn't be living this way. I wouldn't have this sense of real bereavement. And that it really is, my status as a dissident in Canada. And let me just mention, cops fuck with me here. I deal with cops face to face, and you can probably just guess from the tone of my voice, I'm very good at dealing with cops who try to intimidate me or try to bully me. I'm someone who has a background that lets me do very well in Canadian society on that surface level. So people might not suspect how extremely unhappy I am here and extremely unhappy I am with the status quo. But my point is, again, it's not that I have some kind of standards that are so high. It's totally possible that if I just stayed in some other culture that I fit into a little bit better, where I appreciate the politics and the society a little bit more, and I feel more positively about the society that I'm a part of, that it wouldn't have that quality. But yeah, so to stick with Jenna Marbles, I'm partly pissed off at Jenna Marbles, right? But I'm pissed off at the whole fucking society. It's the society of walking your dog and feeding them cow meat and chopping up pigs to feed them to your dog and treating a dog like a toy, taking a wolf and breeding it to the point where it more resembles a cat, there's so much about this that's wrong. And then the Jenna Marbles is celebrated as a vegan celebrity and a leader in the vegan movement. So yeah, but the deeper underlying discontentment with the society is really, really fueling all that.
So we've got a lot of Americans, I think, is most of the people in the audience, and they don't generally know a whole lot about Canada. Yeah. And I'm just kind of, and also this is for my own interest, can you kind of explain, you've mentioned some animal and vegan sort of issues in what you were just saying there. I don't know, is that the core reason for your sort of dissatisfaction with Canadian society, or there's, to an American who knows nothing about these issues that bother you, can you kind of give us a little bit of a insight into what it is that?
Sure. Well, I mean, for foreign Americans specifically, I think what I draw attention to is this. You Americans are very proud that you fought this revolution, that you wrote this Constitution, and you had this Civil War. In Canada, we had none of those three things. We never had the revolution, we never had the Constitution, nor the Declaration of Independence. We never had the Civil War. And yet, isn't it remarkable how similar conditions are in the two countries in every imaginable way?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. Do you know why, or do you have a theory on why that is?
Yeah, I'm writing a book about it right now. I'm on chapter 3 of my book. So yeah, it's something I've been meditating on a lot lately. And what I'm trying to point to is how misleading these political conceits are. And I think in this case, I mean, what I've just mentioned, I think these are political beliefs that people acquire in childhood. So they're very similar to religious beliefs. People start believing in the uniqueness of America and the American Constitution. It's like, well, okay, but if that's so unique, why is it that Canada is kind of 98% the same, in terms of the real lived experience day to day? Like, I don't know, walking around Seattle versus walking around Vancouver. It's walking around Toronto versus walking around New York City. It's hard to spot the difference, especially talking about the political difference. What are the differences in political conditions? It's very, very hard to pin down. So no, that would be kind of step one if I'm talking to an American. And step two, is probably to appeal to their awareness. Well, I come from a country that is built on genocide, on absolute cultural genocide. It's built on this British Empire system and this system of overtly undemocratic parliaments that we call a democracy, and I'm a product of an education system that I consider absolutely abysmally terrible myself. So I'm in this position. And then I'll give a third step because it's only one sentence long. One of the things I like to remind people of is, I'm a Canadian citizen. My daughter is not. I made the conscious, intentional choice to refuse to allow my daughter to become a Canadian citizen. So, I mean, it's one thing if you say, like, just in kind of vague, nebulous terms that you're unhappy with Canada. But no, when I had the choice, that was the decision I made, is to put my foot down and say, no, I'm so, these factors in Canada, they're so real, they're so important. I would rather have my daughter growing up in France, going into the French education system, and being part of a country that isn't built on genocide, and where they do have a very different history of revolutions and civil wars, you can at least say.
So do you feel that Canada is, as a country, is more guilty of this cultural genocide than America?
I think you can look at Canada, the United States of America, and Australia as imperfectly parallel cases. You know,
I think it's neglected from that conversation quite a bit.
Oh, right, sure, yeah. No, sure. I mean, you know, now in what ways is Canada worse? In what ways is Canada better? I wrote a very short essay once pointing out how remarkably similar even the treatment of indigenous people was in Russia under Joseph Stalin. And that was specifically the indigenous people who are way out east in Siberia and who are both genetically and linguistically related to our native people in Canada. Because that's the history of where they came from. They look the same. They have the DNA has proved it, and their languages are related. And then you look at the forced assimilation, residential schools, slow motion genocide policies under Joseph Stalin. Now again, what does that tell you? Well, depending on how you look at it, you could say Canada's policies were just as bad as Joseph Stalin, or you could say Joseph Stalin's policies were so bad they're almost as bad as Canada's. You know, so yeah, I mean the comparisons are odious. It's worthwhile, and you can learn things from those contrasts. But one that always stuns me is I hear people claim that Japan is built on genocide against its native peoples. I've done the research, I've done the history. I said, what are you talking about? You know, to me, that's not comparable at all. The internal history of Japan. Japanese massacred other people that were conquered. Japan conquered Cambodia and Laos and stuff. They conquered Thailand. Different story. But you know, so no. I mean, the next question really is, you know, what are we doing the comparison for, and what are the conclusions we're trying to come to? It is definitely true that both Canada and the United States have a system of parliament. You know, in one country called Parliament and one country called Congress. But we both have a system of parliament that was designed to not represent the indigenous people from day one, and it still doesn't represent them. But obviously, if you or I traveled back in time and we started conquering North America, say, okay, well, we'll set up a parliament, and okay, so this is New York State at a time when 90% of the people are indigenous and 10% are these colonial settlers. What are you going to do? You're going to have a parliament that only represents the white colonial settlers. You're not going to give a seat. You're not going to give a voice to the indigenous people when they're the majority, you know. And then step by step, they're snuffed out. They're kicked off their land, and so on and so forth. They're extinguished. It's actually the American legal term. Extinguishment is the term used in American law. And there's no interest in even having seats for them when they're only 10% of the population. Like even when they're a tiny minority, there's still no place for them in your parliament, your Congress, your state senate. So yeah, in that sense, they're very comparable histories. In some ways a little bit better, in some ways a little worse, here and there.
So you mentioned that you sort of don't. Yeah, I guess you're not really feeling like this is the society that you. So I guess okay, my question, I guess, in relation to the way you feel about Canada and how you don't really like you didn't want your daughter to be raised here, you don't really feel so great about the history and so forth. Is there, and obviously the current politics, I imagine you've also got issues with, is there a country that you do feel like kind of more represents your ideals, or where you think you'd belong more?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can give you two examples, and they're both very imperfect. But of course, I feel much more positively about Switzerland, for example. Oh yeah, sure. No, in terms of actually having a real democracy, Switzerland is a really positive example. More of us should study. And I've always pointed out to my girlfriend, it just comes up in different contexts. Just even when the news is openly saying, they'll just state as fact on the news that America is the wealthiest country in the world and has the greatest system of democracy in the world. It's like, America's not the richest country in the world, but I notice you're choosing not to compare yourself to, say, Luxembourg or Switzerland. I mean, there are countries in Europe that are much wealthier than the United States and also have a much better quality and depth of democracy. But to give an example that's a little bit closer to a third world country, but that's still tremendously appealing to me, Greece. Greece is a deeply messed up country, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, so there isn't the wealth issue like Switzerland or Luxembourg would have you. But they care about democracy. They're the birthplace of democracy. They're never mentioned in these discussions. It's never mentioned like, hey, Greece is a place that really matters. And I just say I've been to Greece. I don't have illusions that the Greek people are a bunch of philosophers. They watch football and they drink beer and they eat meat a lot of lamb kebab. There's a lot of things I don't like. I don't like the religion either. I don't like the Eastern Orthodox Christian religion or something. There's a lot wrong with Greece. But sure, I'm not comparing the United States of America to some kind of ideal. I feel that I'm comparing the United States of America to very palpable, real examples. And I mean, two more real quick. I think everyone acknowledges this: Japan and Taiwan. South Korea is a pretty positive example too. But Japan and Taiwan are societies that reacted to being conquered by the United States of America by outdoing them. And in many, many obvious ways, both Japan and Taiwan are factually superior societies to the United States of America. Quality of education, crime rate, quality of democracy, quality of healthcare. The healthcare system in Japan or Taiwan compared to the United States of America. Nobody, I can't say nobody. Incredibly few people are willing to just reflect on this and say, hey, the position of the United States of America in the world is not being the world's leader. And then the position of Canada following along behind America is therefore kind of one step back from America. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Cambodia for a minute. I know you've got a pretty deep sort of history with that country, and I've